investment flows towards energy transition continue to rise, reaching $1.1 trillion in 2022, up over 30% from the previous year. This goes to show that investors recognize just how important the transition to renewable energy in a low-carbon economy is for our future. And according to Bloomberg, 2022 saw a remarkable acceleration in energy transition, in part because of the energy crisis, with record renewable energy installations and electric vehicle sales worldwide. The global auto industry is undergoing a sea change in implications to the energy sector, as electrification is set to avoid the need for 5 million barrels of oil a day by 2030. The annual Global EV Outlook report from the International Energy Agency shows that electric vehicles' share of the global car market stood at 4% in 2020. It is expected to reach 18% this year. However, the overwhelming majority of these vehicles are concentrated in 3 markets: China, Europe, and the US. More than half of all electric vehicles on the road today are in China. Closer to home in Malaysia, the Road Transport Department reports more than 10,000 fully electric vehicles registered to the department's database. At Maybank, we remain unwavering in our sustainability efforts. As of March 2023, I'm pleased to say we have mobilized a total of almost 40 billion ringgit under our Sustainability Commitment 1 to support low-carbon transition initiatives and sustainable development outcomes. In this regard, we have been actively helping our clients in their transition and decarbonizing initiatives in the real estate, power, and oil and gas sectors, among others. Our involvement includes a landmark sustainability-linked 1.1 billion project financing deal with Pelancaran Independent Terminals, whose operations are involved in a high-risk and hard-to-abate sector. So people may ask why brown sector? Brown sector, right? Transition by definition to us is a journey. In positioning customer centricity at the heart of our decision-making, we recognize that no 2 clients are going to be the same. Our clients will be on different stages of their transition journey. We also recognize that we have the most impact in shaping the future when we make the effort to understand our clients' needs and proactively help them on their respective transition pathways. Ladies and gentlemen, Maybank aims to become part of our clients' sustainability journey, whether for fundraising, for advising, or investing. So with this as context, I'm pleased to announce the launch of Maybank's Enhanced Environmental, Social and Governance, or ESG research later. The ESG research is a key thought leadership initiative aimed at broadening and deepening understanding of ESG principles amongst our clients. Reports from Morningstar state that in the first quarter of 2023, total sustainable fund flows into Asia ex-Japan stood at $1.7 billion, or a mere 5.9% of total global sustainable fund flows. Clearly, we can do much better, collectively in attracting more sustainable investments. It is going to require bold and ambitious plans, strong execution, and yes, a better appreciation of ESG and why it needs to be integrated into how we live and invest. With the National Energy Transition Roadmap, Malaysia presents the perfect opportunity to advance this agenda in this part of the world. At Maybank again, for the ESG research, we will be investing about 1.6 million ringgit over 2 years to elevate the research capabilities of our analysts for ESG research via professional certification and upskilling programs. So we're committed to staying ahead of the learning curve in our effort to keep our clients abreast of the latest ESG trends, and very much in line with us trying to be a leader on this area, in this area. So as you know, motoring community has been abuzz with news of Tesla launch last week. I'm pleased to say we have entered a strategic partnership with Tesla Malaysia as well, making Maybank a key EV financier in the country. So consumers will be able to own a Tesla through hire purchase financing from Maybank and auto insurance or capital coverage from Etika. Ladies and gentlemen, from supporting businesses on their decarbonization journeys to arming our clients with market-leading ESG research and helping consumers own their first electric vehicle, we are constantly on the lookout for ways to ease adoption of ESG principles into everyday lives. We are in a privileged position, and we take our role as a major enabler of holistic, sustainable financial solutions very seriously, in line with our mission of humanizing financial services. The transition to net carbon zero will require not just political will, but also significant investments, which of course predicated on solution and advice, and this is where we come in. So in conclusion, we're committed to playing our part as a force for good in Malaysia's journey towards its net zero emission goal, realizing Malaysia's aspirations to become a leader in renewable energy. So we look forward to hearing from the esteemed speakers, and we wish you all a productive evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato'. And now for the keynote address, I'd like to invite on stage Minister of Economy, Yang Berhormat Rafizi Ramli. Dipersilakan, Yang Berhormat.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Yang berhormat Saudara Nazmini Ahmad, Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change. Yang berbahagia Datuk Nur Azmi Dirun, Secretary General, Ministry of Economy. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Umar, Chairman Bursa Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Datuk Sri AWANI Hussein, Chairman of Securities Commission. Yang berbahagia Datuk Muhammad Umar Swift, CEO Bursa Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Encik Rashdan Yusof, Chairman of Energy Commission. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk Sri Zamzam Raini Muhammad Isa, Chairman Mimik Berhad. Yang berbahagia Datuk Khairul Sadiq Ramli, Group President and CEO of Maybank, Ms. Caitlin, Country Head CLSC Malaysia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Moments like this do not happen often. A global crisis that demands urgent and serious action, an impetus to act that lies in the hands of a reformist government with political will, and a real opportunity for Malaysia to seize its one shot to be a regional powerhouse. Our economy has not changed much for the past 10 to 15 years. Our industry base is stuck in the middle, snapped by the bottom of countries taking away our low-cost advantage and struggling to reach higher in the value chain to compete with more advanced economies. Our talents have migrated elsewhere to compete better, and our country is more accustomed to following the crowd than leading it. In the first month of assuming office at the Ministry of Economy, one of my main tasks was to find an area of focus that would combine our existing strengths, take advantage of global megatrends, and fundamentally transform how our economy works. The launch of the National Energy Transition Roadmap today marks that important change in our thinking. It is not only a document that contains interim measures to meet our net zero target, but it is a combination of strategies and initiatives that could transform our economy, livelihoods, and our place in the world. After months of engagement, brainstorming, and securing final commitments, we will unveil phase 1 of the NETR that contains 10 flagship catalyst initiatives that will define policy thinking and economic direction in years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, the NETR would help us transform our economy by opening up profitable ventures that are good for the environment and good for the economy. Our ability to continuously rely on finite oil and gas resources is diminishing. Frequent price shocks and structural decline in the fossil fuel industry has made it harder for us to treat oil and gas as Malaysia's be-all and end-all. For the past few years, our investments into renewable energy have lagged behind our peers. Southeast Asian counterparts that started their RE projects much later than ours have matched or even exceeded our installed capacity today. A key reason for this is because past administrations have not made the RE industry a sufficiently profitable venture for businesses to undertake. In fact, a race to the bottom was normally how the industry was structured in the past. NETR is this administration's effort to change the economics of RE so that we could rapidly scale up our installed capacity with the right infrastructure and technology. 2 months ago, the Ministry of Economy and it's very difficult to pronounce next ministry, NRECC. I prefer to call it NREC, but they don't like it, it's wrecking something. 2 months ago, my ministry and NREC made a few pivotal policy decisions that actually went under the radar. First, we lifted the export ban of RE with the purpose of increasing the potential yield that could be obtained by companies that participate in this transition. Second, we announced the establishment of a central electricity exchange that will be operated by a single market aggregator to ensure prices are fair and transparent. And to double down on our commitment, we even stretched our RE installed capacity targets by nearly 2 times, from 40% to 70% by 2050. The NETR launched today puts these policies in motion by introducing 10 wide-ranging catalytic initiatives that will open up investment opportunities between 435 billion ringgit to 1.85 trillion ringgit by 2050. One of these projects is the integrated RE zone that will be championed by Khazanah Nasional Berhad and carried out through a joint venture between UEM and Intramas. At 1 gigawatt, this hybrid solar photovoltaic power plant is the largest of its kind in Southeast Asia, and if I'm not mistaken, is number 8 in the world by capacity. The scale of our ambition has attracted high-profile global investments from major economic blocs totaling 6 billion ringgit, and that MOU shall be inked today. NETR also opens up the hydrogen pathway in Sarawak as it implements rounds of projects to emerge as the hydrogen hub in the country and put in place the framework of CCS, carbon capture and storage, so that catalyst projects could be implemented in these 2 years. We will continue to take advantage of the declining technology cost in RE and build first mover advantage in nascent levers as we move our investment into these high growth, high value areas. Ladies and gentlemen, beyond this, we have also come to recognize that if we want to affect change at the national scale, we would only succeed if our policies touch people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Currently, the people who adopt clean solutions do so out of altruism and goodwill. Convincing a family of 4 to buy and install a solar panel at their rooftop for 20,000 ringgit at least, that's the cheapest investment. It's still very difficult to convince normal Malaysian families to fork out that amount of money. Understanding the science and data of energy transition is also out of reach to many who do not share the same sense of urgency as those who have spent decades in the utility sector. NETR is designed to break that mold and make clean energy a financially relevant option to most households today. We are turning it upside down. Instead of asking every household to pay for an expensive solar panel, we are offering an income opportunity. In every home, we intend to give households the option to lease out their rooftops in return for a monthly income that could lower their electricity bills and put more cash in their pockets. And I was very glad that Saimdabi Property came forward and in full support of this initiative, which they will share into this session. The government is taking the lead on this by allocating so far this year 80 million ringgit and more in the coming years for solar panels to be installed on the rooftops of government buildings. We are also changing our old practices internally at the government level, where we will no longer penalize government agencies because previously, when an agency took the initiative to install solar panel, their operational budget will be cut because it means that they incur less for electricity. So eventually it cancels each other out, you know. Government departments say, there's no point for me to go through this because what it does is basically my allocation will be cut. So we are also changing that so that we won't deduct their budget from electricity savings, so that that budget hopefully can go for something else and that goes directly to the people. Soon, our vision is we would like to see solar panels installed nationwide, covering offices, factories, multi-purpose halls, mosques, and all types of buildings. To raise this consciousness further, Malaysians could also contribute used cooking oil and waste as feedstock for the biomass and biofuels as an energy level under NETR. Outside the homes, NETR will also be felt on the road. 10,000 charging stations will be installed along highways and commercial buildings by 2050, and the first and last mile of public transport will also be electrified so that we travel with cleaner energy. With increased investments stimulated by NETR, more well-paying and high-value jobs will also be created. The first phase of NETR alone is estimated to bring about 23,000 high-impact jobs. That means more families could afford a more comfortable and secure life, giving better education to their children and better care to their parents. Working parents in clean energy jobs would also feel more fulfilled and impactful jobs that safeguards our children's future. These are not just plans, these are policies in motion. Ladies and gentlemen, but there is one last thing. As a nation, we are used to falling behind and lagging behind. And when others pace ahead, we rarely think about how we could be the ones leading others instead. With NETR, however, there is a real opportunity for us to lead Southeast Asia as the regional powerhouse in RE, but only if we dare to seize it. We have many existing advantages that set us up in a good state. Our age-old advantage of a strategic location that connects the north and south of the 687 million Southeast Asians and the western and eastern economic blocs becomes important once again as logistic cost for RE transfer is a deciding factor. Years of operating an open trading economy has also made us accommodative and hospitable to many, such that we are resilient and adaptable to geopolitical changes and different partners. Our talent pool is also mature, with years of enviable infrastructure building experience that puts us in a better position than our peers. In fact, unbeknownst to many, Malaysia is ranked first in Southeast Asia, second in emerging Asia, and 35th in the world on the most recent Energy Transition Index 2023 by the World Economic Forum. That means our current systems would prepare us well to make the transition in a comfortable, just, and inclusive manner. Around us, we are also seeing greater convergence and cooperation in Southeast Asia that did not exist before. The use of a special economic zone, such as the one proposed between Johor and Singapore that we are working on now, will also become increasingly common as Southeast Asian leaders understand that we are stronger as one economic unit than in separate parts. Malaysia is a key member of the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project, the pathfinder to advance cross-border power trade among ASEAN member states and to advance the ambition of an ASEAN power grid. The global rush to clean technology is also evident, exceeding $1.1 trillion in 2022, overtaking investments in other technologies, and we are at the cusp where the wind blows under our wings. That is why NETR is not just another policy document. It represents a different way of thinking about our economy and livelihoods, and also a real opportunity to find our place in the world and in this region. As we put the pieces together, leading to the launch of the phase 2 of NETR, sometime by end of August, we will be working with you to implement projects that are both good for the environment and good for the economy. The scale of reforms that we shall put in place has only happened once or twice in our nation system. I hope we can continue to believe in the promise of this country and take a chance on doing our parts to rebuild better. Thank you very much for taking your time to attend our launch today. And for the first few times in the last 6 months, I'm actually quite excited to see what the future holds for Malaysia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat. Can I invite you to remain on stage for the act of the launch? And to join YB Rafizi, may I invite Yang Berhormat Nik Nazmi Nik Ahmad, Datuk Nur Azmi bin Nurul, Secretary General of the Ministry of Economy, and from Bursa Malaysia, Tan Sri Abdul Wahid Omar and Datuk Muhammad Umar Swift. And with that, we are pleased to invite Yang Berhormat Rafizi Ramli, Minister of Economy, to launch the NETR and Yang Berhormat, on my count of 3, please activate the launch by placing your hand on the device. Now counting down from 3, 2, 1. With a group photo together with a digital copy of the NETR.
Saya pun boleh cakap isu agama minyak sikit. Thank you, Yang Berhormat, Tan Sri and Dato. If you could kindly make your way back to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, you can access and download a copy of the National Energy Transition Roadmap through the QR code at the back of your event tags. Now, as we prepare the stage, let me tell you a little bit about what's next on our agenda. The National Energy Transition Roadmap, or NETR document, will serve as a strategic framework outlining Malaysia's vision, goals, and actionable steps towards achieving a sustainable and inclusive energy system. As to how this will all materialize, we will have a three-way chat on the National Energy Transition Roadmap and its role in promoting Malaysia's economic growth and sustainability agenda. This will involve moderated by Bursa Malaysia's Dato' Umar. You know it's going to be a candid and frank discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back on stage YB Ramli, Minister of Economy, YB Nik Nasmi bin Nik Ahmad, Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, Chairman of the Energy Commission, Encik Muhammad Rashdan bin Muhammad Yusof, and our moderator for this session, Dato' Muhammad Umar Swift, Chief Executive Officer of Bursa Malaysia. Over to you, Dato' Umar.
It's already on. It's on, I was about to say, that problem sitting on chair like this.
Berhormat Tuan Muhammad Rafizi Ramli, Minister of Economy, and Berhormat Nik Nazmi Nik Ahmad, Minister of, we won't call it NREC, we will call it NIECC. And another former Maybanker, Chairman, welcome, and welcome, gentlemen. Now, I haven't downloaded it, but I actually have the document. No, I only received it. So, what I'd like to do, and I think we are filled to capacity. And so, for those of you that are standing at the back, our thanks. But what we're really seeing, my ministers, not my ministers, my ministers, is the excitement of the capital market of a just transition and the roadmap that we are outlaying, because it is catalytic. And since I'll probably ask a few questions about part two, so I can mention all this later if I know. But working my right to left, and what does me. What can you share us? What are your initial thoughts around part one of the energy transition?
Okay, thank you.
Because it is bold,
Yeah.
it is exciting,
Yeah.
and it is all those things we were promised, catalytic, it's got granularity, and then 10 high impact projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we've seen what we've tried to do since the new government has come to power in December 2022, I can see that the energy sector is one of the parts of government that has been moving quite fast. Early on, we started with the journey towards targeted subsidies, and that has continued. It has a life of its own by now that fortunately it's created less anger and backlash after we did the very difficult parts in the beginning. Then I think it was in May when Rafizi and I we spoke about renewable energy trading for the region to capitalize on our position at the center of ASEAN, which Rafizi mentioned just now, and his long spoken vision of an ASEAN power grid. So, and at the same time, what we've done, along with the shift towards targeted subsidies, is also to relax on the various policies on solar. For example, previously, if you are a high voltage user, you're not allowed to have self-consumption for solar. Now we've allowed it. For households, for the NEM Rakyat program, there's basically no limit to what solar you can install. So, with that as the background, what has been launched in this, I don't know, is NETR, not NETR. NETR. So, what has been the energy transition roadmap, I think has been something which is quite refreshing. Because now it's the next stage. We've been in power for more than half a year. People want to see big, tangible projects where which can encapsulate the vision of energy transition for the country. We have a lot of potential, immense potential, which I think we have not really fulfilled, and it's important that we can embark on that path as we want to realize our goal of achieving net zero earliest by 2050. That's how I see it. But for that vision, which to me is centered on climate change, but for that vision to work, the economics have to work. So I think this is where the economics of it comes in to push through that transition.
Well, thanks, Ron. But if you bear with me, I'm going to go to Danny because you had the floor for a little while. Danny, thoughts?
Sure. I'll just take on the economic imperatives that what Rafizi mentioned earlier in his speech. And given that we have capital market investors globally as well today, I'd just like to share with everyone here that this NETR or NETR approach is actually necessary for us to be part of that global economy. So I'm taking excerpts from the World Energy Transition Outlook report by IRENA. IRENA already did the NETO for the Malaysian Energy Transition Outlook, but they've also done a global one. So for example, in 2022, last year, their capacity plant up globally was 300 gigawatt, and 83% of that is renewable. But out of that 83%, out of that renewable mix, 3/4 was only concentrated in 3 countries, which is US, China, and well, EU, 3 regions. So YB Rafizi and YB Ling are absolutely right to say that we need to then take leadership this month to do the same. IRENA then extends that outlook to go all the way to 2050. They predict that by that year, generation will have tripled. Total generation will be 90 petawatt hours. 1 petawatt hour is equivalent to 1 million gigawatt hour. That's how large it is. But the interesting statistic out of their report is that 91% will be renewable. 91%, that's the whole world. So in that sort of backdrop, our goals is necessary. We have to do this. We need to be part of that global transition as well, as part of our national transition. But I do believe if you look at all the other regional companies within ASEAN, we will be the leader in achieving a 70% at least RE mix by 2050, the same year. And by that time, I hope and I aspire as part of the Energy Commission that we will be part of the ASEAN power grid as well.
Just before I go to that, I think of energy as the ultimate lifestyle. Our audience can hear us. We have air conditioning because of electricity. And as a nation that is developing, we are going to need more and more power. 70% are in. It's an audacious target, but it's necessary time for just transition. With that, paraphrasing some of what we've been discussing earlier, how do we come to a 70% target? How does that move into that just transition story? Because while also affecting a fundamental shift in our economy.
Well, I think we have to work within a few economic and societal parameters. The first one is to make sure that we insulate ourselves from future energy shock. We have to realize that part of the fiscal problems that the federal government had to endure in the last few years was because of the high cost of energy raw materials, the coals and the gas that makes up majority of our power generation. We are a nation that is very comfortable with our oil and gas heritage. Sometimes too comfortable that we think the gas will be there forever. If we don't scale up fast enough, there can be a situation within 10 to 15 years that we have to consider importing gas. So one of the main concerns from the government is just not about, going into green. It's actually to insulate our future and our society from energy crisis. And from time to time, government has a projection of what kind of generation capacity that have to be installed in order to meet the energy demands. And it's always up to 20, 30 years in advance, because it does take a lot of time to put all these capacities in place to balance. We are lucky because we do have a high reserve budget. And while it is a cost to the public, it is also an advantage that we should use in order to transition and put more solar, because solar doesn't require renewables. Solar is one big potential because it doesn't require feedstock. And by that, not only that it will insulate the countries from future energy shocks, we hope it also balances the tariff in the future so that it is more representative of the potential that we have. So So all these were taken into account. The 70% target for 2050 was a sweet spot that we think will be able to balance between the possibility and practicality of pushing up the capacity. It takes into account that gas is a transition fuel that we have to maintain to make sure that it's a just transition. It takes into account the multiplying effect of green economy, that you need to have a certain amount of scale to be able to create a sustainable and vibrant. And it also takes into account the scale that we need in order to live in this region. So it's not a number that we plug from the air. We look at the solar rooftop capacity, about 332 gigawatt in the country, and we work backwards and we map, how much that can we do practically in this time. And I think most importantly is a stretch target that can set our ambition. We cannot have an ambition without a stretch target. It's only with a high ambition that we can bring the whole nation together to work, and it's only by then we will get the respect of the investors and our peers in this region. And that's why it's 70%. And I hope I live long enough to see that it happens. But I also hope whatever happens, our nation, everyone will own up to this, because, as I said, it's a good opportunity for us to lead in this one particular area.
I mean, as the actor on stage today from the Minister, can we do it before 2050? Possible.
I think the ministers after us will answer that.
Moving along, we touched on the 10 coloured projects. Investors, capital market investors. I mean, to be blunt, I want everyone in this room to work out with an investment strategy after we wrap up today. What can we share?
Of course, every time we talk about renewable energy, the focus has always been on electricity, and it's always almost about solar and hydro. But we have a certain capacity and experience to also lead in some other areas. For example, and I've repeated this quite a few times publicly, we've built the whole LNG value chain with our partners in the Far East, from the extraction, from the processing of LNG, and then from the storage. Eventually, we built the market. Back then in the 80s, LNG market and long-term contract was still nascent. It took a while for us to really benefit from LNG, but we've had the experience of working with our partners to build a total value chain. Now, there is a lot of focus to move to hydrogen, and we are at the same position, or that the world is more or less at the same position that we were in the 1980s. It's still a nascent market. There's a lot of doubters about whether it's doable. There's a lot of technology and cost challenges to transporting hydrogen. There's a lot of skepticism about practical application of hydrogen. But, in my engagement with our counterparts in Japan, in the Far East, they are very serious about it, as they were very serious about LNG about 40, 50 years back. So we have been there, and now we have the first mover advantage from our experience as a top LNG player that we can now replicate into hydrogen. So that's one area of key focus as well. Building the infrastructure of hydrogen is important, and in the next 1 year, few months, we are looking at how we can divert public investments
to create a practical use case for hydrogen fuel. It sounds very ambitious, but I think it is doable. At least I think it's doable. Because we have done things that was considered not doable then in the 80s. So that's one. We also have an advantage when it comes to carbon capture and storage. It's still quite nascent in the world. As the market develops and matures further, more and more countries, and we know especially as it moves closer to 2050, many countries will be rushing to meet their net zero commitments. At that time, at some point in the future, there will be an inflection point where carbon capture, utilization and storage is not only a fancy name, it becomes an economic imperative as more and more economies have to weigh between, the cost of not meeting their net zero commitment and the cost to meet. And so, I foresee in the future, CCUS will be a permanent feature in the global economy. And we have that advantage because we have a lot of geological formation. Petronas and Sarawak government are actually quite advanced. If anything, the government has to catch up with that to make sure that we have the legislation, the rules and the regulation in place. So the hydrogen, value chain, CCS, and of course EV has been talked about. EV relates to people better, and with the commitment for the government to make sure the charging infrastructure are in place, because it's always a chicken and egg thing. You cannot have too many EV if you don't have enough charging stations. Now it is a national policy to make sure that charging infrastructure is in place. So I think all these, as you go through one by one, the 10, and what we wanted to be sure, that's why it took us about a few months to get the commitments from our players. We want to make sure that this is not just announcements. These are basically committed investments, and they are going to happen. What we can do on government side is to expedite as much policy change and as much incentives as possible so that it becomes a national focus and it allows all these 10 projects to tick off per the timeline. And I'm sure that will have a spillover effect to the whole industry, especially not just the energy transition and green industry, it's also to the OGSE industry, because oil and gas service equipment sector are actually almost identical to the support system that is required for energy transition. And finally, Omar, I think when we do this phase by phase, project by project, because the government has to change the way we do things in order to facilitate this, it will move towards a much more open and competitive energy market in this country. And I think as and when it happens, it bodes well for the country, for the investors and for the market.
I'm just going to park that last comment because that's actually really interesting. I think that's something we need to explore a little bit. Just looking at the 10 Hala projects, foreign equity restrictions, investors, any policy guidance is available at this point in time? Ministers?
I think for the flagship project, as you mentioned, as I think Rafizi has mentioned, a lot of it comes out after months and months of serious discussion and commitments from the parties. And I think, maybe Rafizi can comment further, but from our side, for ours, we are quite agnostic towards who was to come in. We have that our ambitious agenda in terms of climate change, in terms of net zero, and in terms of energy transition. So, how we achieve that, I think it was Deng Xiaoping who said, he doesn't care black cat or white cat as long as it can catch us the mic, right? So I think we are quite practical and pragmatic when we do that. And I think there's no choice but to take that attitude if we are to achieve
if we keep doing the same thing, or if we keep barricading ourselves, looking inwards, we can't go to the next level unless we work with those people who have the technology and capability to do this. And I hope, and I'm sure, apart from these 10 flagship projects, that's precisely the intention of NETR, to make sure that we have a much higher international technology and investment content from all over the world.
Yeah, but just moving on to the point I put in the parking lot. Key enabler, you mentioned those magic words, transparent pricing model. The key enabler of that would be a single aggregator, I would think. That's all right.
I think otherwise the whole hall will listen to me for one whole afternoon.
Yeah. So we already have the concept of the single buyer that was launched many years ago as we the reform of our power sector. It's not completely independent yet. At this point of time, it's ring fence, and I think but the idea is to move towards more liberalized market-based utility sector. And I think one of the other commitments that we had is that when we lifted the ban on renewable energy export, we wanted to use also this energy exchange, which we are in the works of putting into cabinet the detailed proposals, the discussions we have between Energy Commission and RECC. So, but in the future, I think when it becomes more open, because it will require the market will be much more different than what it is today. Then I think the idea perhaps one day of having an independent single buyer in the electricity sector or in the energy sector will actually be feasible. But for now, the current approach is still to ring fence it within the whole ecosystem.
Sorry.
Yeah, the concept of single aggregator is much talked about. But you see, one of the issues, Omar, for example, YB Rafizi aims that hopefully most households, hopefully the majority of households will be getting or will be developing solar, so they will become prosumers. One of the issues with that, of course, is we need to then match the demand and supply, and we need to do it efficiently in the absence of market. We don't have a market yet, we don't have much market yet. And therefore, there needs to be this construct, which is an aggregator that can do that efficiently. That's the whole point. So it would be under the government's purview, of course, to make sure that the players, essentially all players get a fair deal, both supply and demand side. But it's about efficient allocation, and it's about incentivizing all the small consumers to also get into the generation game, so that the RE100 companies and also cross-border, which is Singapore, also get gigawatt levels of energy. Now, that is much easier said than done, and that is one of the key roles of an aggregator, to ensure that allocation is done efficiently. And don't forget the delivery. And what I mean by delivery is the grid. There needs to be huge tens, if not maybe even hundreds of billions over the target to 2050 to achieve the delivery of reliable renewable energy. RE is variable, and what I mean by that, there needs to be a tremendous amount of battery storage. We unfortunately don't have wind to shore up RE at night. We just don't. So, and obviously there's no sun. So we need to have basically load matching of daytime generation against requirements also in the evening as well, which happens to be a peak load for this country. The peak load happens after work, just before dinner. That's where it's the highest. So these technical requirements and that efficient allocation requires the necessity of an aggregator in the absence of market today. Hopefully when the market develops, as YB Nick mentioned, who knows, a decade from now, will be much better. But we need to have NETR today. We need to have the transition right now.
clearly there needs to be a robustness of transmission, the aggregation, as well as storage. Do we envisage we'll be in a position where, say we had 4 contiguous houses I could sell to you for peer-to-peer, if you like, the empowerment of the consumer or the producer as my home network. Solar cells on the ceiling, I then sell back to grid, right, bypass if you like, we net off and we just pay the transmission charge.
Okay, well,
Future state.
sure. I just want to highlight again for all interested participants and stakeholders the issue of subsidy, which YB Rafizi mentioned, and the desire by this government to reduce that subsidy of the burden to the rakyat. YB Rafizi mentioned we want also to be independent of the volatility of fossil fuel prices. So the challenge today, Omar, is that I'd like to introduce this concept of solar poverty. So solar poverty, which is actually also apparent in all other advanced nations that have put up solar, because solar is essentially the privilege of the rich. Only the rich can afford 30,000, 40,000 installations, even in the terrace house. Notwithstanding financing, well, of course the participant has to pay for the financing anyway. So the problem there is solar will enable that family to obviously monetize the sun, as it were. But it is done at the moment at tariff levels which are subsidized. The NETR right here is based on subsidized tariff. In other words, someone out who's not having solar is paying for it. And that is what solar poverty is. Solar poverty is where the have-nots, the solar have-nots, actually end up subsidizing the solar haves. So that is something the Commission, together with NRCC, must resolve first. So that concept is then called cost reflectiveness. So when you want to have large-scale solar deployment, that equalization must happen first, where there is no cost subsidy from the poor to the rich. That's perverse, obviously. But that can be achieved because there are demand sources who will pay market prices. And those market prices are much higher because the demand is so high.
We aggregate and export.
Correct, and that's where the aggregate comes in. So that's the architecture.
Just to add on to Omar's question, that's the discussion we explored with Samdabi Properties. One of the key decisions we made in May, and we worded in such a way that is quite general to allow more flexibility in exploring the implementation phase, is this: that government will allow a willing seller, willing buyer, self-contained system for renewable energy generation. And by that, it now, based on that decision, it now allows, for example, a developer like Samdabi Property, when a developer develops a township, they can offer and package the leasing of the rooftop together with the whole package. So what it means is, because the policy now allows for a self-contained generation, it means that we will allow for such projects to bypass the normal quota, so that they can go and plan a large township and install solar and make sure that the nitty-gritty of not just the cost for installing solar, but also to buy, the RE and then to either use it in the system or sell it to the single market aggregator. It now then makes it palatable for us to see more and more township and commercial townships to be powered by solar, independent of how and when the single market aggregator develops. So, we sequence it in such a way that all these
can take place in parallel, because even if we don't have a single market aggregator by then, those townships that want to have a self-contained RE generation, that means that they have to install energy storage as well, just to manage the variability. And suddenly you can end up with township and households that can monetize their rooftops. Of course, once a single market aggregator takes on, it also means that other rooftops, either commercial or domestic rooftops, can now tap and monetize the rooftop, because the idea is you create more retail RE players that go and lease the rooftops, install the solar at their cost, because the economic should make sense, as Danny mentioned just now, because there is a margin of putting the cost for the solar rooftop, and then the tariff will allow some margin that the whole economy will work.
I see our countdown time is gone, and we're getting short. The general question, Danny, if I may, not about specifics, NETR in your mind, or NETR as we now call it, thank you. With regards to NETR, non-specific, the challenges in making it happen, making it real.
Sure.
The biggest challenge by far is basically grid migration. So if you're talking about 70%, you are looking at an 11-fold increase in generation plant up in RE alone, 11-fold. However, the current grid only has about 2 or 3 gigawatt left in it. Before, if you put more than that, it will start breaking down, and we will have essentially blackouts across the country. This is not a challenge just for Malaysia, this is a global challenge. And it's not just about batteries, it's about transformers, it's about the transmission lines itself, it's about interconnections as well. When we have services, we want to have bi-directional flow between nations. If we're going to be part of the ASEAN power grid, we must have that anyway. We want to have interconnections with our own or other states within Malaysia, i.e. Sabah Sarawak in particular, and so on. That, Omar, requires literally hundreds of billions of investment. But therein lies the capital market opportunity, because as Rafizi and Majlis mentioned, it is actually commercially viable. If you look at the pricing of RE, not just out of Singapore, but there are demands within all those RE 100 companies within Penang, within E&E sector, in Selangor and Johor, all of them are squeezing and of course Singapore, as we have already mentioned. So the biggest challenge is getting the grid ready, making those investments, and making sure that they are commercially viable.
Thanks, Danny. Nick? Non-specific structural
challenges. Yeah, I mean, I think, as mentioned, I think Danny has covered most of it. But I think, you know, it's a change of mindset as well. For those of us who are involved in, those who are involved in the energy sector, the shift towards more RE, towards a much more different market, it's a new paradigm. And as Danny mentioned, it's not a challenge that we face alone in Malaysia. We saw, for example, Vietnam, their plant up in solar was very impressive. But what happened? The grid is not ready for it. So, you know, there are all these considerations that we have to make. But eventually, you know, we know that we have this grand commitments. And we know that we are at the center of ASEAN. All this idea of interconnections, even when we built Baharu to do the submarine cable, it was not feasible all those years back. But now it makes sense, because as we plant up more RE, we need to have more interconnections. That's how it works in Europe and many other regions. So I think we have to be able to imagine something different. And I think we have to me, you know, we have all these announcements that we've made, and having NETR in place now, it actually provides us the opportunity to see some implementable projects and how the pathway to achieve those objectives.
Thank you,
challenge on our part after this, now that you create an expectation, a pathway, we have to take a one world nation approach to this. So I'm sure the investment community and the green energy player in the country are all fired up and jet up and can do their bit. Then the government must do our bit. And the bigger challenge for us is that we need to create the ecosystem basically requires policy adjustments, not just in the energy or energy transition. It requires fiscal, rebalancing. It also requires certain politically and socially sensitive policies. For example, how do we treat our energy subsidies? We've done quite well, I think, with the electricity tariff. I know there are pockets of people not happy here and there, but by and large, we've done it. And as we move into the more socially sensitive policy retargeting, subsidy retargeting, like RON95, diesels, that will be something that I think this administration has to stay on course. Because this is not just about the fiscal consolidation, that is required as a component of the ecosystem for the whole energy transition and uplifting of the economy to happen. We also need to realign that. And of course, we inherit a series of legacy contracts. When we talk about rebalancing our energy generation and power mix in the future, there's a lot of things that we have to manage with the legacy as well. So this is where the politics of it come in. So I hope that we'll deliver our part, the private sector deliver their part, and society understand it enough, and as they feel the benefit of it, only then I think we can pull this off.
Rafizi, Danny, thank you on behalf of the audience and myself. You've been generous with your time, more generous with honest answers. So we draw to a close for this session by MC. Let us